Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Today's guest is Francie Jain, founder and CEO of Terawatt. With over a decade of experience empowering leaders and organizations, Francie is on a mission to reduce employee turnover and unlock organizational potential through accessible, expert-led coaching. She's passionate about building thriving workplaces where people and businesses grow together, and today she's here to share how coaching can create lasting, transformative impact. Francie, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I'm delighted to be here.
I am so excited to have this conversation because everything that I believe about business starts with people. And we often don't necessarily treat them as well as we could or we should. So describe for us what your coaching practice is all about and why it's really important today.
Yeah, so Terawatt is a B2B marketplace. And we're kind of like Airbnb for executive coaching. So we are matchmakers and we make it really easy to meet incredible experts and have them make a proposal on your sort of customized bespoke needs. And so, what we're really trying to do is say, listen, there's a ton of research on the power of human capital investment, and that most companies just aren't aware of the relationship between supporting professional development for their employees and the impact it has on their business. And so every other, area in the organization, there's a real focus on, okay, well, if you invest this much money, I can, predict a return on investment or ROI of, let's say, 125%. Almost every area has that except for HR. And so what I'm saying is actually that data is out there, and there are strategies to track this data and come up with the ROI and help organizations really understand what it can do for them. And so I'm just trying to get the word out about it. And then at the same time, I think, well, actually, really, organizations are just one of our stakeholders, right? So our stakeholders are like coaches, organizations, and employees. And so the way we're set up is that we want everyone to excel. We're very like a rising tide rises all boats. And so everyone gets a lot of value out of Terawatt. And the goal is really just to make everyone, excel in their lives and their work and solve the world's problems that way.
The model is fabulous. There are post-pandemic even more coaches and consultants in the work in the space than there were going into that experience. And many are small businesses, boutique, very niche, some solopreneurs, right? That alone can make an impact, but with the value of a marketplace and people coming together to solve and find bigger problems that you can solve as a group, I find that absolutely intriguing. Where did the idea come from?
Oh gosh, it was this very long, sort of elaborate process, but basically I was just learning about like manufacturing workers and how we're talking about the loss of manufacturing jobs in the States. And I was trying to see if the statistics that they were using were right. And so I spent a long time researching that. And it's true. Actually, the statistic that everyone has been focusing on was like since 2000. But I just saw another chart showing that like the peak of manufacturing in the US was like in the 40s. And ever since then, it's actually been going down. And it's for a lot of reasons. Part of it is offshoring, and part of it is like automation, and part of it is robotics, and all these different reasons. But my thought was like, wow, well, what happens to all these people? Like, if your career is going away, like who's helping you? Because it just seemed like that's crazy. That's a lot of people. And I was just sort of curious about where they would go, and if that was like an impetus for people to kind of, become xenophobic or, just kind of hateful, or could that be a lot of fear in people? So just all these questions. And so I couldn't find what I was envisioning. And I thought that was crazy. And I think part of the reason I thought it was so crazy is that one of my superpowers is I've switched careers many times. And I think I just I thought, well, that seriously must exist because we're in America. Things are always boom and bust. I mean, it's the way we believe in capitalism. And so I just kind of got obsessed with that and started thinking, God, I can't believe it doesn't really exist. And so I wrote a manifesto to my cousin, who's like an ed tech founder. And so we started talking about it, and I started reading all these sort of entrepreneurship books because previously I've been working in finance. So it's just like a wildly different area for me. And so it sort of evolved into a B2B marketplace. And the idea is B2B because there's, a budget for employee learning and development, which could be the same as attending conferences. But also that there's so much research about the impact on professional development to the organization. And so I just felt like there's so much research to support it. And then at the same time, my other joke is that I'm the age where people become coaches. So I know a lot of coaches. And so I was able to run this idea by my friends, and they were like, oh, I love this idea because I don't know where to get leads. I basically have to do everything myself. And so it all kind of came together. And then one of my other superpowers in finance was I was like a matchmaker. So it was really, it felt really similar to what I've been doing, which is kind of connecting two groups and sort of being a little bit of a negotiator and a little bit of an educator and, kind of an optimist, bringing them together.
There is research that shows that truly successful leaders are optimistic. It is impossible to be a successful leader without being optimistic. I am saying that with certainty and definition, but I can't cite the source right now. But I know that it's something that really piqued my curiosity a while ago. And so it's that piece, that nugget stuck in my brain. So yes, of course you're an optimist. Talk to me a little bit. Tell me a story about, some of the successful matches you've made in this new undertaking, and some of that success from either the employer, the org, from one of the three perspectives.
Yeah, so there's so many different ways to kind of think about what is success. I mean, the one case study that I'm obsessed with is actually through one of my coaches. Okay. And he has a PhD, and I think his dad had a PhD, and his father even had created a metric, a way to understand yourself in relationship to other people within a community. And it's called opposite strengths. And that coaching sort of framework got used for a large healthcare organization in Colorado. And when they started, the healthcare organization had 24% employee turnover, which was higher than the average of the 20% of just hospitals, period. And they were in a smallish town in Colorado, and they just couldn't keep, they were like, this is unsustainable. We have to figure out a way to bring it down. And so they used this coaching. It was opt-in group coaching. And it was basically, ultimately it's kind of about psychological safety, which is really understanding what makes you unique, what other people bring to the table, and how you can leverage those differences to have really good solutions to problems. And it's just it's a lovely framework. And it's just kind of understanding things that seem really obvious to they're not obvious to everyone. And, sort of letting people see how the differences are beautiful or kind of valuable, that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's opt-in, and every year they used it, their turnover went down 1 or 2% a year. And after 9 years, they were at 4% employee turnover, which is an incredible accomplishment, right? So 24% to 4%. And then they started winning all these awards. And what was crazy about it is that when they were at 24%, so the difference in dollars from when they were 24% turnover to 4% turnover is $32 million a year. So what's crazy is that they were investing in this group coaching, which I can guarantee you does not cost $32 million a year. And they were able to achieve $32 million in profit, right? It was at the end of the day. And so they could choose what to do with that. Could they build a new building every year? Could they give people bonuses? Could they give people raises? I mean, they had so many choices now.
Well, and even beyond that, right? In healthcare, patient experience, right? Actually investing money into saving lives. Oh my God, $32 million is a lot of money.
Right. Right. And so I think what's so cool is that, and there's no downside to it. That's kind of my point, because they started winning awards because their metrics were so good.
Yeah.
Right. Their safety was probably like top tier, their patient experience was top tier, all these metrics that hospitals track, they were either going up or down, based on what was more preferable, just because people were firing on more cylinders. You know what I mean? Like, you can imagine, like, so whenever I think about that, I always think, the example in my fantasy is, I'm just making this up, like a toxic doctor who a nurse doesn't want to deal with and says, I'm just like not going to deal with that person. And then errors happen because they're not communicating.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you find a way to bridge that gap and you catch the errors before they happen?
Yeah.
And it's like little things like that where you're just kind of like going about your day. So that's a great example. And I think about it all the time. Another one is we did a group session with actually a bunch of doctors, and we did a personal assessment for all of them. And I took my own first personal assessment in business school, which was really valuable to me because it unlocked all these things I didn't know about myself. And those doctors were probably like 10, 15 years in their career, of being doctors. And this was the first time any of them had ever taken a personal assessment. And it really blew my mind because once you do that, you start to realize how you do think differently than other people, and it can account for some of the frustration in problem solving. And that really blew my mind, but it also made me realize that there's a lot of opportunity to help people in healthcare or even sciences where the science, or like the work, the sort of engineering, math and science work is the key component to your job. But everyone forgets that we all were working with humans all the time. Yeah. So you have to also focus on how to effectively communicate with humans, even though you can speak English fluently and you've been speaking English or speaking your whole life. But the point is, everyone can always get better in like how to like tell their story or communicate their perspective effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like mind blowing to me to see that we have stuff like that all the time. Or I'm trying to think.
Well, and let's just play with that for a little bit, right? In that space again, people are typically at a doctor's office or in a hospital when something's not right. They're not there because, oh gosh, everything is awesome and I just want to spend some time with my doctor, right? The patient is under stress and may or may not be communicating effectively because of whatever is actually wrong. And it actually blows my mind that that doctors don't understand personality assessments, behavioral assessments, and understand who they are, because they're the ones who actually impact outcomes most directly. Okay, arguably nurses actually do because they give more of the one-on-one interaction, but that ability to communicate effectively and not just yell and scream and bark orders, wouldn't it be an interesting experience in an emergent situation if the healthcare team, when they are jiving and they effectively communicate, they have the shorthand, they respect each other, everything changes.
Yeah. And I think so. I think what has happened in healthcare is that there's this sort of philosophy that like an operating room dictates how people function in a group, which is I'm not going to get involved in that. I do not have a medical degree, but it sounds very smart to me. So like, let's go with it. It sounds great, right? But then when you get out of an operating room where there's problem solving all day long, everyone's a human, everyone's adult.
Yeah.
An adult, we have ways to solve these problems, and that same structure sort of exists in it or throughout the interactions. And so one of my questions or curiosities is, could that be some of the problems with this friction between doctors and nurses, or doctors and admin, or nurses and admin, blah blah blah, and tech? Yeah. Because I think that that nature, the hierarchical vibe, is not really 21st century America. Like, no one else functions that way. And so I have to believe that like there's like a lack of psychological safety, in these organizations, and like that kind of thing would just help everyone so much, and just like pointing out problems, or making someone a little bit better.
Absolutely. And, it is right all about human interaction and human communication, and the littlest, smallest changes can make such impactful transformation occur in an environment, right? You can go from being a toxic culture to high performing. It doesn't happen overnight. Your stats showed it was a 9-year investment for a large enough organization to systematically make that change. But it all begins with one person or a group of people saying it's time to do something different.
Yeah.
Francie, you've talked a little bit about some of the impacts that organizations have had through the coaching programs. What about you and your journey as a CEO and a founder? What are some of the challenges and hurdles that you've overcome getting Terawatt up and running?
Yeah, well, I mean, too many to count. I'll say the main thing is that there's this really great psychological principle of, what got you here is not what will get you there.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the harder parts of entrepreneurship, in that as soon as you kind of know what you're doing, then you have to learn another skill set and or relearn it or apply it in a different way. And I think that that's kind of hard, but it's also kind of fun and challenging. And I think if you can sort of see that through the right lens as like a really fun challenge, like to get better every day, I think it's a lot more fun to do this. But I will say that that's a mindset you have to get into. And even though I probably would like to think I was there, it's like a process again to constantly be asking for feedback or reading books to try to get better, or throwing yourself into super uncomfortable situations. So I'll say that. But the thing that's awesome about it that I love is that I live my values. I don't do anything for anyone else except what I think is right for the business. And so my North Star is always how do I make this business, live on its own? My joke is it's like a third grader and I'm trying to get it to college. But it's just, that's my North Star, right? So every decision becomes really easy because I'm just trying to do what's the long-term smart move to keep the coaches happy, keep the employers happy, keep the employees happy, what threads the needle that works for everyone, and keeps everyone sort of engaged and thinking well of Terawatt. And so I've had jobs in the past where you sort of do things which I would think is not smart and maybe might be a little bit short term or whatever, but you did it because someone told you had to. Whereas now, I have all these lawyers will say, oh, this is the boilerplate, you should do this. And then I read it and I'm I don't need to dominate these coaches. That's not fun for me. And I want to have them in my marketplace forever and ever and ever. So I don't want to do that. And I've spent more money taking apart boilerplate. You know what I mean? But now it's great because the coaches are so delighted when they get the contracts because I'm saying exactly what is in the contract. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to take away anything that they've created. Right. And it's kind of different from others.
Well, and that's fun, right? So, we're here to disrupt and innovate. That's the whole purpose of the show. And it's simple things like that, right? It's boilerplate. It's the way we've always done it. It's the corporate status quo for building these relationships and, written in legalese and all of the jargon, when I'm assuming that as you've simplified this, it's probably more plain English than lawyers speak. And it's so simple to do.
Well, it's also, in my opinion, the boilerplate stuff is really dumb, and it's more like it's in there because you can get away with it. Mm-hmm. It's not in there for any other reason. And so, for instance, one thing as an example, the lawyers you should just not pay the coaches till 90 days after the coaching happens, so you can save that cash. And I was I wasn't really thinking that much about it. And so I mentioned to a few friends, and they're well, what if you have these coaches who aren't independently wealthy, who really need that money? And I was oh, good point. I don't want someone to be desperately waiting for this big payment. And then I finally was what do I care? So now it's in the contract. As soon as I get the money, you get your money. There's no holdback. I'm not trying to make interest on the money or something like that.
But that's what that language was intended for.
Yeah.
Right. It was float, really, is what we'd call it. They call it in finance.
I just find it I just find it's but you're not making that much money. It's kind of dumb. You know what I mean? Okay, interest. Well, especially right now, it's not we have super high interest, right? So, it's that kind of stuff, or one of the other things. I never realized this until I get started. But these other coaching competitors of ours, they all have the same business model, which is a services business model, and meaning that they pay the coach an hourly rate that's way below market, and then they mark it up in a way. And so the coaches who are really, really successful, who've been doing this for years, wouldn't accept that rate. And so that's been really fun for me to say, okay, cool. I want to be that person who can work with market rate coaches and find a way to help them. And it's not kind of like either accept, this terrible low pay, or I have to do everything on my own. And so I think that we're feeling a niche, in the middle. And that's like so exciting for me. Like that, talk about disruptor. I mean, that's to me like really, really fun. So, and that's work with the coaches because we have almost like 100 coaches on the platform, and they've all come through word of mouth. We could have millions. You could be around the globe. I mean, this is because it's like virtual. A lot of the coaching these days is virtual, so there's no reason you can't be, doing time zone arbitrage or, other things like that.
Francie, that's fabulous. And I really love the simplicity of one of those lessons learned, right? Boilerplate legal contracts, my words, not yours, suck.
Yeah.
And right. And just simply looking at that to come and find a relationship, because this business will only survive based on relationships, and create one that is positive and impactful for all parties involved. If you have piqued the interest and curiosity from members of the audience, how do they learn more? How do they find you?
Yeah. So there are two ways I'd say. At our website, we have a get in touch page. So it's terawatt.co, C-O-no-M. And then there's a little get in touch page, and you can schedule a call with me or get on our newsletter. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And so you could follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn and or follow Terawatt. But that's the best way.
And those links will be in the show notes to make it easy for the audience if they're listening while they're doing something other than sitting down in front of their computer. Francie, I have enjoyed this conversation so much today. The idea of the B2B marketplace, right? That matchmaker for coaches, consultants, organizations, and their employees to find the professional development that will help them weather storms. Because as you said early on, right, the boom and bust cycle of the American business world is ongoing and ever constant, right? So whenever we start to feel most comfortable is probably when we're at greatest risk. And this platform allows employers and employees to upskill and learn and do different things through group coaching models, but the opportunity to find the one that fits them best. For our coaches that are out there that are listening, this is a tool that is a lead gen tool that helps you actually create that pipeline in. And the results for employers who are bringing in these services, the healthcare example, turnover at 24%, over time dropping down to 4%, is absolutely mind-boggling. So Francie, it was a great pleasure to have you here with me today. Audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.